Polara Fireheart is finally mine. I've completed Faction Wars hard mode, all of the stages, all 3 stars. Which of the stages and which of the factions were the most difficult, and which of the factions did I have not a very good roster for? We're gonna rank it all up in today's tier chart. Let's go. Hey guys, SMZ here. We're back playing Raid Shadow Legends. And yes guys, I am gonna rank each and every faction based on 2 parameters. One, how easy or difficult they were based on the x-axis. So if they were super easy, you'll find them all the way on the left. If they were super difficult for me, I'm gonna find them on the way to the right. Similarly, I'm also gonna compare that to the depth of the roster that I have. Did I have a solid legendary or mythical champion that was able to carry me? In that case, you will see that faction ranked a slightly higher. Similarly, if there was a faction in which I did it basically with epics and rares, then you're gonna find them a little bit lower on the list. Disclaimer before we start, this is gonna be a very subjective ranking based on my experience, my roster. So it's going to be indicative for you, or maybe not, but take it with that pinch of salt. There's a free champion that you can get by using the link in my description. That is Narma the Return, a great champion to battle the Demon Lord. And you can get her alongside other crazy good epic champions like Anax, like Uugo, and like Mausoleum Mage as you progress through the game. How to get these champions for free? Here's how to do it. You go into your Plarium Play and log out of your current account. Click the link in the description and register with a brand new email address. Download the game and then play the tutorial, and you will find Narma sitting there chilling in your inbox. And you can get all of these crazy good epic champions as you progress through the game. Do not miss out on this opportunity. Click the link in the description and get these cool champions. With that said, let's jump into it. The first one is gonna be Bannerlord. So let me showcase my roster. So for Bannerlords, again, I was a bit lucky that midway I pulled Marichka, who has been instrumental to clearing out the faction, especially the lower stages, but I did it mostly without Marichka most of the stages. So my damage dealers were Quintus, which is a free champion that you can get from grinding the live arena, and then I was lucky to pull Staltus. Those were my key champions, but the carry for me was basically for most stages was Archmage Helmet, another free champion, and then Giscard as well for a lot of the stages. Titus came in handy with his provoke, with his block active skills, but it was a decently stacked roster for me, to be honest. And this was a stage which was decently challenging, not a lot. So let's see where I placed that in the list. So it was, I think, on the case of difficulty, it was somewhere around here. And I did have a decent roster, so I'm gonna place it right here. So that's gonna be my ranking for the Bannerlords. Let's jump into the next one, Barbarians. So for Barbarians, I think, carried here massively by none other than Armans. Armans is so solid for this faction. His stuns, his control is just amazing. He carried me. He's a free champion, so a lot of people will have him. My damage dealer was Thor, another not free, but fusion champion, and he was my main damage dealer. So this faction I completed basically all the way through except one stage, which was the no weak hits. And that is the last stage that I did for all of Faction Wars live on a stream last week. The problem with that is basically Thor, I could bring him, but his passive, he attacks even when you don't want him to, which caused issues. But I was carried mostly by free champions here, Armans, Thor, Loki, a lot of these good champions. So I had a decent roster, but achievable roster, and it was not the most challenging faction for me. So where would I place this? Let's take a look. It was quite easy, I would say, overall as a faction, and I was carried by good champions. So I'm gonna place it right here, I would say. Let's continue on to Dark Elves. So now Dark Elves was very interesting because for Dark Elves, I completed this without a very good damage dealer on my account. My main damage came from a 6-star Crushing Rend Wizix. Yes, Wizix. Just because I had a 6-star soul. A lot of people feed Wizix to Lydia, and Wizix is such a good champion. Please don't feed her if you're thinking about it. She was my main damage dealer. I built her up for doing damage. Similarly, Mithrala, I switched her blessing to Rend. Those were my 2 damage dealers. So in terms of having no big damage dealers as a mythical or a legendary, I lacked that. So my roster was limited in that way because both of these champions are rather free champions, right? But it was a relatively difficult one to finish. Some of the stages which were nightmarish to me were basically those free stages. I do have Ray, for example, who does put an AoE freeze, but it's only a 50%. I didn't want to book her to 70% chance. So I had to put Mithral in a Frost set. I had to bring in, was it Durandal? Yes, Durandal with his A1. It was a nightmare, even those stages. Block Revive was lucky to have Xavier, but even then it was more difficult. So this stage for me was gonna be a bit more challenging. Where would I place it? I would place it on the difficult spectrum, and I would say my roster. Yes, I had legendaries, but I did not have very non-free-to-play legendaries is what I was gonna say. So I'm gonna place it right here. Let's go to the next one, and the next one is Demon Spawn. Demon Spawn, I was carried. So Demon Spawn, I was carried by one guy, and that guy is Carnage. Carnage the Anarch. When you get the 6-star soul, you don't need anything else. He's just gonna smack through everything. He can also control the waves with his block passive and block active skills on the same ability. It was one of the easiest. I think this was the first faction I did 3 stars, the fastest. So for me, this faction was carried hard, but it was very easy. I would even place it all the way over here. Very easy, almost a piece of cake for me, but I was very much carried by a mythical champion. Free mythical, but still. Let's continue on the next one. The next one is Dwarves. Dwarves was a faction I was very much stuck at because I was lacking good damage dealers until the Tholin Fusion. So Tholin Fusion really helped me out, and I did have good legendaries as Molly and Brogni to help me out tremendously. Geomancer comes in handy, and one of my secret weapons here was actually Cornelia. Cornelia is an amazing champion with her Speed Battles aura, which helps tremendously in the later stages. And if you can get one of your epics who has a high blessing, for me that was Dimitha, I gave her Commanding Presence, which boosts your team's aura even further. So that gave me the speed that I needed to go before the enemy champions. So I was very much stuck at this. It was a bit difficult, but not the most difficult. But Tholin came in clutch for damage. As you can see from my roster, I do not have a lot of damage dealers. I do not have Trunda. I do not have Herndig, for example. I have a lot of good PvE damage dealers when it comes to bosses, but not waves. So Tholin was very, very handy. So where would I place this one on the list? I would say it was not... It was somewhere here, I would say. And I was carried. So I would place it it was definitely more difficult than Dark Elves. So I would place it right here. Let's continue on with High Elves. So with High Elves, I basically had this roster right here. My main damage dealer is one of my favorite champions, which is Supreme Elhain. I got a 6-star soul for her a while back, and she has been my main damage dealer for a lot of areas in the game. She hits so incredibly hard. So she was able to carry this for me along with Arbiter. And the fact that I pulled a 6-star soul for Deliana, who was sitting in the vault, but since I pulled that 6-star soul, giving her a 9-piece Slayer has helped me out tremendously. So with these champions, I had a good roster, and it wasn't as challenging as some of the other stages. So for that, I would place Dark Elves. It was, I would say, this side in terms of difficulty, and I was carried by good champions. I would say somewhere around here would be my High Elves. Next one is Knights Revenant. So for Knights Revenant, I was also hard carried. Even for the 21 boss, I had Empress as my damage, and then 4 support sitting around it. Between Empress and Mad Hatter, it was just carried by these 2 champions. And then of course I used this guy, Calvalax. Freaking amazing. I happen to have 2 Calvalaxes, which makes wave content super easy. I had to slow down to kill the waves because otherwise I was just killing them too fast with like 8 poisons being stacked on. So for me, this faction was carried hard by one of the best champions in the game, which is Empress, especially on his alternate form. I don't have any blessings, still he's really, really good. So hard carried, and it wasn't that difficult, to be very honest. So where would I place this faction? I would say it was relatively easy. I would place it somewhere here, and hard carry. So kind of similar to the Demon Spawn. Next up is Lizardmen. Now Lizardmen was a nightmare of a faction for me. So Lizardmen, I do not have any good damage dealers. Look at this roster. So I just got Donatello as a support as well. I didn't have him while completing. So I didn't have any good damage dealers at all. So what I did was I went hard for the tournament to get Ramantu Soul, which happened fairly recently, and that helped me complete this faction. Ramantu, I gave him Rend at 6-star, and then I put him in a full damage set. And Ramantu can hit incredibly hard when you give him the damage. He is an attack-based champion after all. So I was carried by Ramantu, who's a free champion, and then of course by Pythian, who was a fusion. And interestingly, Razin in a very fast build, even though it's very difficult to get him fast, considering his base speed is only 91. But I was able to use him to in a reflex plus merciless set, trying to get this to a lower cooldown and get this done relatively fast. And of course, then I was landing a lot of poisons with Venom Mage. So I did not have a very good roster for this one. So it was very difficult for me. I would say that it was somewhere here in terms of difficulty for me, this particular faction. Next up is another very annoying faction, which is the Ogrins. So Ogrins, again, I do have a big gun, but he's not high blessing. And this is one of my findings from doing Faction Wars hard. Blessings matter much more than depth of the roster. So I did have big gun, but I did not use big gun for my damage. He was just not smacking hard enough. I used Siege Hulk, one of the best epic damage dealers in the game, in, of course, a 6-star rend. And then, even then, it was very difficult. Why? Because I do not have a reviver. There are so few revivers in this faction. So it's an incredibly difficult faction to build anything around off of. One of the best champions that helped me out was Korogar Deathbell, which is just incredible. And of course, very underrated fusion in Blizzard the Howler. His freezes are so important to be able to complete this faction. So did not have the depth of roster in this one at all, and it was extremely difficult. I would say even more difficult than Lizardmen. So I would place it all the way down here. Now Orcs. Orcs was another one that was difficult. So Orcs, story of two halves. I do have a mythic here, but he's without a soul. He's not that interesting for me when it comes to the Faction Wars hard mode. However, what I do have is Warlord, and I do have a Varl, of course, and I have Angar, who's actually quite good for wave-based content because of his control. But then I still struggled for the last stage until the Croc Hat fusion, and then after this it became very simple. So I would say that I had a decent roster, and then I struggled. This one is the most difficult to place, so definitely I had a good roster, I would say, but it was difficult. I would say let's put it midway just because of that, because it was difficult until Croc Hat showed up. So somewhere around here would be this particular faction. Now next up is Shadowkin. So for Shadowkin, of course, I think I have a pretty decent roster. Most of it is mostly free to obtain, I would say, with Ninja being a free champion, Mikage is a free fusion, Michinaki was available from a deck of fate a while back, and then I had Lady Kemi, I had Toragi, one of the best supports. So I did this faction without a reviver until one stage in which I had to bring in Kinagashi as a reviver, epic reviver. And then I used a lot of Toragi, I used Oboro a lot, especially in the no weak hit stage. He's incredible. I used Genbo, so I did use a lot of epics, for example, in this particular fight. But it was an easy one to do until I think I was stuck on the final stage where, because of no reviver, that was so difficult. But where would I place this? This is also a bit tough one. My roster was good, but not the highest. I would place it around about here, I would say. Mostly relatively easy. Yeah, somewhere around here, I think is a good one. Next up is Skinwalkers. And of course, Skinwalkers has my favorite champion in Marius. And of course, Marius carried it all the way through. Did not have a huge roster depth, I would say, compared to a lot of more endgame accounts, but Marius is basically all you need. Some stages I struggled with, especially stages where I had to land like 10 debuffs before killing, and Marius just kills them way too fast. So I had to tell Marius to slow down, don't kill them too fast. But it was hard carried by Marius, this faction. And I would say it was relatively easy, and I have a depth of roster, but I did use a lot of epics and rares, so I would put it right here. Yeah. Now, Sylvan Watchers is very interesting because with Sylvan Watchers, I used a lot of epics. In Daithi is still my main damage dealer, don't have any Lego damage dealers, and I had Kellen the Shrike, another epic damage dealer. Those are my two damage dealers. However, I have been carried by supports like Arbais, supports like Padraig, and of course Elva. Was relatively quite easy, but I did have a good roster on my hand, so I would say quite easy. Something around this, I would say, is where they will lie. Next up is Sacred Order. Now for Sacred Order is basically, I did have Cupidus and I did have Venus, so those two are incredible. Unfortunately, I don't have a high blessing for Cupidus, otherwise it would become much simpler. But I also have Cardiel, so I have a pretty good roster. And even then it was tough. It was quite tough, especially some of the last stages. I did not build out Noelle for a long time until the boss stage where I did need to build her up. And then I pulled a 6-star soul for Errol, and then that changed the game entirely. So I would say that I had a decent roster, but it was difficult up until I pulled the soul, and then it became super easy. Polara, of course, is in this faction now, and I don't think she's super useful at all anymore, but I mean, good to have her. So I would say it lies somewhere around here. It was difficult. It was difficult. Yeah, somewhere around here, I would put it. Actually, no, maybe here because I have quite a good roster for this. The last faction has been Undead. I've been very lucky for two things. One, I got Sifi and Rotos combo. Fabian is such a huge carry in this one. Such a huge carry. He's kind of Arman's level carry. And then I got a 6-star soul from Mashal, which make this all so simple. I was stuck in that one stage where you have to kill somebody with ally attacks, and I don't have any ally attack champions here. They're very restricted. There's only one champion, epic champion, that has ally attacks, but I do not have him, or I fed him many times before. Corpse Collector, I think he's called. But what I did was I put retaliation gear on Mashal, and I set things up that Mashal was most likely to be attacked, and then his counter attack would kill multiple of them together on his A1. This faction was hard carried, but it was one of the easier factions to do for me. I would say I would put it even somewhere here. Yeah. So that is kind of my list. A decent spread, of course. This part, the lower left quadrant, is relatively empty, but that's what I would expect it as well. But this is kind of my experience with all of the factions when it comes to hard mode. Let me know in the comments if your experience is different. Where are you struggling with? I can also help you out. Join my Discord. I'll link it in the description, where I can help you out in wherever you're struggling when I'm streaming. Thank you very much for watching till the end, and see you next time.